Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is going to be a great episode. I've got return guest and good buddy on, Justin Hollandsworth, to talk about how he uses the moon phases to be successful on whitetails. All right, welcome to the Fall Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Blasey, and today is episode 125. And before I get into this, I do want to apologize to everybody out there because I've got a lot of stuff on my plate right now, and it's the podcast has kind of taken a back burner. Last week, I was out all week. My daughter broke her femur. She's going to be 3 years old in a week, and that's right, she broke her right femur, and it was pretty crazy. It happened at daycare. We got a phone call Monday morning and said, you need to come pick her up and everything. We went right to the ER. Did not know her femur was broken at that time. They took X-rays and then shipped us off to a bigger hospital, a children's hospital, where we spent 2.5 days. So she's doing good now. She's in a full cast. She'll be in that cast for 6 to 8 weeks, and it's a big adjustment. So that's kind of taking precedent right now, and not to mention that we are coming up fast on closing on our house. We sold our house, which I had mentioned before in an earlier podcast, and trying to get where we're going. Going to live for the next year while we build our house. We're trying to get that ready and trying to move stuff out of our house. So we've got a lot of stuff on the burner right now, and I think I may have bit off more than I can chew, but the podcast has kind of taken a back seat. But I apologize. I'm going to try to get them out as quickly and hopefully every week that I can, because I know everybody out there really likes to listen to the Fall Podcast every week, and I appreciate that. I can't even explain to you how much Justin and I appreciate that. Justin is not on today's episode. He is in Utah on a mule deer hunt, so I haven't got any updates from him yet, so I don't know how he's doing. But we'll find out soon, because I know he'll be back here soon, and we'll be doing a podcast talking about his trip. So hopefully he kills one. But I'm going to fast forward and get to this week's podcast and talk to you a little bit about what we're covering today. So Justin Hollandsworth, I had him on a couple weeks ago. I mean, just one of the most solid dudes that you'll ever meet. And honestly, he is probably one of the guys that I've ever met that is just, I mean, everybody's a student of the game, but he just takes it to an elite level. And I really like picking his brain about this stuff because he's got the track record to back it all up. So that's why I pick his brain and like to have him on, because he's done it. He's been there and done that. It's taken him years to do it, and he'll even tell you, he's failed a lot to succeed. So it takes that failure in those growing pains and those steps to get to where he's at, and he's still learning too. I mean, he'll tell you, he's not an expert by any means, but he knows his stuff. So just going to kind of rattle off a little bit what we talk about. We talk about the moon phase. Now, Justin's got a specific way that he uses the moon around the full moon. It's pretty unique to hear. So we talk about that, and then we talk about, hunting mobile. It's something that I'm going to put in my arsenal this year on my family farm, is hunting mobile, getting tighter, hanging and hunting more. And then we talk about how the full moon is going to fall this year on Halloween and what that means to him, like what his game plan is around Halloween, around that full moon, and how he's going to use it to benefit him. So it's a good podcast. I really enjoy his company, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this. So sit back, relax, sip a toddy if you want, I guess, or if you're driving somewhere in a long drive and your wife or kids in the car, hopefully you enjoy this with them, and hopefully they don't tell you to turn it off, I guess. So appreciate your guys' support, and as always, thank you for everything, and I'm going to get over this interview with Justin. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast. Today I have actually a guest I had on a couple weeks ago, and I mean, my life has been busy. Yours has been busy. We've rescheduled. We've got a lot of things going on, but I want to do a part 2 of what we did before. Justin Fabian is not with us. He's on a Utah hunt right now for a mule deer, so, I mean, lucky him. But Justin Hollandsworth is back on the podcast with us. So, Justin, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me again. I'm excited.
I am too.
We've been chatting it up though lately, so we could have had a couple podcasts already.
I know it. My recorder says 21 minutes, and that was just bullshit session, basically. So there's some things I want to touch on today, and I mean, you and I have kind of talked about it. You know, we brushed on it in the first episode that we did, and it was the moon phase and how you hunt the moon. So I definitely want to talk about that, but there's some other things I want to get into, how you're using cell cams, and I want to kind of like set that point home because my cell cam's been doing the same thing. So that kind of just reiterated like what you've been learning over the years. I actually saw it firsthand this summer already. So I want to get into that. And then if we have time, I want to get into your approach from October 23rd to December 1st, because you even said yourself, you know, I think you think a lot of guys think you just hunt early season, kill your buck, and then you're done. But you have a totally different approach once, you know, 23rd, 24th of October comes around. So I want to get into that because that's intriguing me. And I've been trying to model a little bit of what I'm going to do this year around what you're doing, just because you and I've been picking your brain like crazy, and I really like what you're doing, and I want to implement some more things to there. So if that sounds good to you, I'm ready to do it.
Yep. I'm happy to help too. I mean, plus, I always look at it like this too, is you never know when, I can pick up something from somebody else too, just through like conversations like this. So
for sure.
I'm always, I mean, I when you stop being a student, and you become a know-it-all, I think you hurt yourself. So I think always being a student and trying to learn as much as you can about the greatest creation God ever put on earth is always the way to go, I think.
Yep, I definitely agree, man. Well, let's start off with this moon phase. So to kind of reiterate to everybody listening, last podcast we talked about we brushed on how you said if there's a full moon, the 4 days before the full moon, was it the morning movement in daylight is really, or no, after the full moon. So the 4 days leading up to the full moon, the night movement's really good, and then the 4 days after the morning movement's really good, correct?
Yeah. So the way that I've looked at it, and this is, everybody's going to have their own theory, and everybody's going to have their own, I guess, style or whatever around the moon and how they go about it. But this is just my observation, and I'm by no means an expert, but based off of field experience and running a lot of cell cams over the last, I've been running probably 10 to 18 cell cams probably over the last 3 to 4 years, but I've been running cell cams probably for 8 years now. What I see is you have your full moon, you have the day before and the day after the full moon. Those 3 days in there always, for whatever reason, tend to be a little slow. The 4 days leading up to those 3 days that I'm talking about, those days always seem to be really good evening movement. I've killed some really good deer during those 4 days, and then you come around to the backside of that on those 3 days that are kind of dead, and the 4 days after that, the morning movement tends to be really good. That's actually how I killed my deer last year, was on that morning movement after the full moon. So that's what I see.
Okay, so did you dive any deeper into that, like correlation to, is it weather? Like, did you have like a weather pattern that you had more times than not when you were killing those bucks, or was it just didn't really matter? I mean, weather, because a lot of, weather trumps moon, basically. So was it weather, or was it, high pressure, low pressure system? Like, did you dive into it that deep?
Yeah, so I looked at the weather and I looked at the pressure, and it obviously the cooler temps, it always, that always increased that movement on one of those 4 day phases. But the movement, even if nothing changed, the pressure stayed the same for, say, those, 10, 12 days in that time frame, and the weather stayed the same. And but the thing that happened was the movement was always still really good in those 4-day time frames.
Okay.
That didn't seem to affect anything, but the pressure, I'm not, obviously I like a high pressure day, and a bluebird sky, like that kind of stuff to me, like, yeah, for sure. But on the other side, I've had some really good days too, when it's kind of spit and rain a little bit and kind of crappy out. So, if, to me, I think it's more weather dependent, to make those moon phases better, not pressure. Not my opinion.
Okay. I totally get that. Now, when you mention rainy days or precipitation or anything, my two biggest bucks that I killed in Michigan, the one, it was raining all day. I woke up that morning, it was raining all day. It stopped, right before the evening sit, and it turned like sunny. It got warm. It kind of got humid a little bit. There was a little bit of cloud cover, but I killed him that night. That was on October 1st, early. I killed him on a transition from bed to food. I was closer to food for his destination. And then my other buck I killed with a muzzleloader in late season, so December 6th, I believe it was. I think it was December 4th, 5th, or 6th. I can't remember. I got it wrote down. But it was snowing so bad. It was a snow that, like, when you look out, you can't even see 40 yards. It's just so much snow coming down. It's coming down sideways. So those two biggest bucks in Michigan that I killed were around, precipitation, stuff like that. Now, filming for the last 9 years, we were in Missouri back in 2014. I think it was 14 or no, it was 2015. That's what it was. We actually had a tornado touchdown. Okay, in a field next to us. We're in the truck going in that evening to hunt. The rain just came in like out of nowhere. Tornado touchdown. It rained hard for 30 minutes. We just sat it out in the truck, and right when the rain stopped, we got right into the stand, and we had a good buck come by us, and Casey ended up killing him right underneath of us. So, like, precipitation, everything. When that encounter happened, I started, like, looking up different things about precipitation, rain, and stuff like that. And a lot of people are saying that, like, after a rain, a deer's sense of smell will, like, heighten. You can smell a lot more the earth. You can smell the earth as a human, like, everything kind of comes alive. And the deer, I guess, really, it opens up their sinus, their nose glands, or all the stuff like that, and they like to move. That's what I've been reading.
But I agree with that 100%, because I grew up, like, as I grew up coon hunting a lot and running dogs and training dogs, and I can tell you, a dog's nose works twice as good under those conditions.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And that's because I know
whitetails has to.
Yeah, I know some coon hunters as well, and they like to train their dogs when it's when the ground and everything is kind of moist. Like, you got that, like, dew kind of feeling at night. Like, they'll run them at night when it's like a dewy night. I don't know. That's just what I've heard and what people that I know of do. I don't know if there's any science to it or not, but that's just what they do.
For sure. Oh yeah, I definitely used to. You take you turn a dog loose on a really cold night, or you turn a dog loose on a really, like, dry conditions like we've had here lately. They really have to work. Now, you put a little moisture on that ground, a little moisture in the air, and it's unbelievable how much quicker that they can work. But, back to your story about, you guys had that big storm and everything that came through, and then it kind of cleared up, like, right after that, and you got in there. I'm telling you, like, I've sat in my truck before and waited out some stuff and watched the radar, and then said, okay, it hasn't stopped, but it's going to be stopping here real soon. And when it does stop, I want to be where I want to be when it does.
Yep.
And that's when you haul ass and get in where you want to, even if it's still raining. I'd rather it still be raining and then get to my spot and then let the movement happen.
Yeah, that actually, now that I think of it, that happened to us in Iowa this last year. Casey and I went down October 1st, that first week, and we had rain for like 4 days straight. And finally it was like, let's just go hunt. I mean, it was a downpour. We just put all of our rain suit on and everything, and we sat at the edge of food one evening, and it rained and rained. It rained all the way to the stand. I mean, we were just getting soaked. We had camera, protected and everything because we figured it was going to stop. Got in the stand, It stopped, and I'm telling you, we saw a couple little bucks, but we saw a pile of does. They were just coming out to the beans, eating, and I mean, does were moving everywhere. So there's got to be some science to it, because every time I have precipitation, I feel like I have a good sit, whether it's numbers or it's the deer you want to see. So
I think a lot of it too just has to do with the fact that you had that weather change, and it like almost it's almost like it excites them or something. Yep. And gets them on their feet. It almost like makes them happy, where they're like, oh, I want to get up and move around and feed and do my thing. Where, I think a lot of times, on a kind of just, and that's why sometimes movement can be slow on kind of a rainy day.
Yep.
It kind of makes them lethargic, just kind of like we get once in a while, on a rainy day, or maybe when the weather's like super hot and it's been that way for a while or whatever. But you throw that into the mix, and I think it's like all of a sudden they want to be on their feet.
For sure. I would definitely agree with that. Now, to kind of go back to your moon phase here. So you were talking about, the days coming up to the full moon and the days after. So a couple weeks ago, when we had our last full moon, I have been running a cell cam on one of my food plots, and I'm not kidding you, I haven't had any pictures in the morning. No pictures all summer, that I've had the cell cam out. No pictures. It's either, you can basically pinpoint them at night at 8 o'clock. They're going to be hitting the food plot, throughout the night a little bit. So after we did that first podcast, it like hit me one morning. I woke up and I had notifications on my phone that the trail cam went off. I looked at them, and there was like 6 does on my food plot. And I'm like, wow, that's it. It hit me. I'm like, man, I haven't had deer in here in daylight in the morning at all winter or all summer. And then I'm thinking in bed, I'm sitting in bed. I'm like, I thought of you. I'm like, oh my God, when was the full moon? Because I didn't know when the full moon was. Went back and looked at like the lunar calendar. The full moon was 2 days before that. So I'm like, holy shit, like there's some actual truth to this. So, and I'm not kidding you, the next 2 days, it was the same thing. And then it started petering off. And I'm like, God, what is this? This is like scientific shit. Like, why don't, how is this happening? So then that's when I text you, and I was like, dude, this is like, it hit home. But I just, you reiterated to me running cell cams. And now there's a lot of people out there like cell cams are bad. Like, I really like them for the fact that how you were like kind of put in my head, you can see that real time. Trail cams, normal trail cams, you pull the card maybe 3 weeks later, and then you got to go back to and look at what the weather was doing that day. I got this real time, and it just clicked. So I totally get it. Love that you told me that. Are you there?
I lost you.
I know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's weird. I had full bars. I don't know what the heck was. I could hear you saying hello.
Yeah, just all of a sudden it just cut out, and I was like, I don't know. I have no idea what happened.
What was the last thing you heard? We'll pick up from there.
We were talking in regards to leading, like how you'd text me because you seen the movement and around that full moon.
Okay, so after the technical difficulty, sorry about that to everybody, but so the full moon you're talking about, the days before and the days after. Well, my cell cam went off, and I wasn't having pictures all summer in the mornings and daylight, and now it just hit me. I'm like, why are these does showing up in the morning on my food plot now, and they haven't been there all summer? Well, it made me think about you and like, when is the full moon? So I went back and looked at the full moon, and it was 2 days before that day. And I'm like, there's no way, like, and then it happened for 2 more days, and then it kind of like slowly started petering off, and then they haven't been in there in the morning since then, but they're in there at night now.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, this is scientific shit here. Like he's got something figured out here. And then, I just think it's cool. I geek out on stuff like that, and I appreciate you telling me that.
And cell cams is what really kind of tuned me into that a little bit more. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I would have caught on to that if I was just out there pulling SD cards all the time. I mean,
right.
You would have had to sit down and like really do some, hardcore record book keeping to be able to figure that out.
Yes.
And I mean, not everybody has that kind of time, but when you're getting that stuff pumped right to your phone, and then you can just then turn and look to see what the moon's doing. And I mean, and over time, you're still, you're seeing this same thing kind of happen all the time. Well, then that's when it like makes you pay attention to it even more. And then you're like, then you're really wanting to soak it in every single time you start getting that movement. And I noticed that like here recently. So today's August 14th. On August 4th, we had our full moon, and leading up to that full moon, boy, I was my cameras were lighting up like crazy in the evenings, like broad daylight pictures of good bucks. And then went through a little stagnant period right there, right at the full moon. And then all of a sudden it got really active again on the backside of that in the mornings. And here recently, say for the last, say 4 days or so, 5 days, then it's been super slow, like just like crazy slow.
Mine's been the same way. Yeah. And I think like you and I talked, you were talking about how the weather's just been like so stagnant and so like just dry, and nothing's really changed. It's pretty warm during the day and nothing's really changed. We need some rain. And I just, to reiterate your point, like we need some sort of change. We need some, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I think, or something here in Michigan. It was like hot for like, a month or something. And then it literally went down to like 61 degrees at night, like at like prime time when you want to be hunting. And I'm like, shit, I'm going to go glass some deer. And I went up to my family farm. We have a big hayfield up there. I saw 85 deer, and
Jeez.
There was like, at one time in our field, there was like 85 deer, and I think almost half of them were bucks, and they were just moving all over. And I'm like, holy shit. So like just that big drop off, of temperature was key. And we only had that temperature for like a day or two, and then it went right back up. But you could tell the deer were moving more with a change.
Oh yeah.
So
without a doubt. That I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of the same movement too. I was jumping in my truck in the evenings and cruising around, and because and the other thing I do too, just I got my spots, and I always try to get like maybe catch a couple of deer that I'm interested in, but I always drive other places too. I'm always looking for other bucks outside of that.
Yeah.
I am, and I'll look for other farms, and if I see another good buck on another farm somewhere else, and the wheels start turning, and I'm like, okay, who owns this piece? And then I start digging into, possibly getting access and stuff like that to it. So I'm always, that's a constant for me.
For sure. Now, with the full moon, now you have tendencies around the full moon. So is there any other moons or any other things that you look at with the moon that are trigger points?
I kind of narrowed it down. I try to narrow it down and make it as simple
for sure. Yep.
As I can, because there's so much talk out there. I think some people have just made it way overly complicated than what it really is. I just I noticed that, during that blacked out phase, I mean, it's the movement tends to be, definitely a little slower. If it's rut, it seems to be middays better. You'll catch that movement. Now, outside of the rut, I don't see, I don't see that. I don't see that midday movement or anything like that. But during the rut, for sure.
Okay, so, and that's what, since 2008, I think it was, I've been keeping track of like a lot of my significant encounters or kills or something like that. And I'll write down, I was telling you, I write down like the day it happened, what happened, some notes, the outcome, whether it was morning or evening, the moon phase, what the wind was doing, the temperature and the pressure. So I was trying, back then I was just trying to find correlations, anything I could tip in my favor. And when I've got the Excel doc in front of me here, since 2008, I've killed 6 bucks on waning gibbous moons. So waning gibbous are the, basically a quarter moon right before a new moon. So the new moon is when it's completely dark. So I've killed majority bucks on that, and then the second most I've killed on waxing crescent moons. And that is, I got my notes right here. It's a quarter moon. Waxing crescent, quarter moon right after a new moon. So it's like right before the dark moon and then right after the dark moon is when I've killed most of my bucks. I don't know if there's any correlation to that. I think I might need to dive into it a little deeper, but I've killed 1 buck on a full moon. It was an evening sit, October 1st, and then 1 on a waning crescent and 1 on a waxing gibbous. So it's like the waning gibbous and waxing crescent are really, those 2 moons have leaps and bounds above any other moon that I've been successful at.
Yeah. It's so dependent on the time of year too.
For sure.
I'll say this, I probably use the moon more during those first 20 days of season. That's a key time for me as far as like how it's going to predict me on how I'm going to hunt and when I'm going to hunt. And I change it up once around the that 23rd of October, 24th of October. That's when I start to change it up. And by the time I get into November, I'm still using the moon. It's basically positioning me where, I'm going to be hunting. And, maybe it's, maybe you get a moon phase that shows the movement's real good, in the mornings, where, okay, so I'm not going to hunt over a food source. I'm going to slip back and I'm going to slide in and hunt some beds and catch them coming back, or a transition area. But yeah, and then by late season, now I will say this, during late season, I don't hunt mornings at all. I just hunt evenings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to kind of go back to, so you said the, first, let's say 23, 24 days of October, you're hunting the moon. I mean, unless the weather probably trumps that. If you got a good cold front in, you're probably thinking the moon phase, screw that. I mean, it's a cold front. I'm hunting cold front. I mean, anybody is.
Yep.
So from, let's say, that 23rd, 24th of October until the end of season, let's say December 1st, let's just put that time frame on it. What's your approach? I mean, what are you said you're really not looking at the moon during that time, but like, what is your approach going the rest of the season through, the rut, and how are you changing up your approach, I guess?
So when we get to that point, like around the 23rd, I'll still pay attention to the moon phase for sure. And that will dictate me maybe like where I might set up and stuff like that. But that's probably the time frame where that's when the sign really starts to show up. That's when, scrapes get really active. You see all the big rubs starting to pop up, stuff like that. That's when I really get into that part of like just reading the sign and going in and and that's when I get mobile too and start to bounce around. I don't get very mobile in that early part because I'm trying to manipulate them in certain locations and trying to put them where I want them. But that's where, when I get to that 23rd, that's where scrapes are huge.
Are you at that time? Are you moving your cell cams to scrapes?
Yep. Yeah. I start transitioning a lot of cameras to scrapes, and trying. Maybe I won't be hunting like right. Maybe I'm not trying to kill that deer right off that scrape, but it's a good way to at least give me a direction of travel, and where he's coming from and going back to. That a lot of times those few pictures in there will give me a good idea, especially if I know the property really well. Most of the farms that I hunt, I know all these farms really, really well. And then I'll say, okay, I got a feeling he's bedding over on that point. And this is where he's coming and going. And then that's where I'll try to move in and maybe, catch him, maybe hooking around. Cause I think sometimes some of these bucks will, just like they will with their bed, I think sometimes they'll jay hook a scrape too.
Right. To kind of come in downwind of it if they're, to kind of yeah. So I got a scenario for you before it's going to be a little off tangent. You just kind of triggered something I want to talk about. Because I want to get back to the mobile hunting. But so let's say you're transitioning your cameras to scrapes. Now, let's say one camera, because a lot of times bucks will hit scrapes after dark. And, so you're like, okay, he's here. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, he's here. Okay, I got a good buck here. He's in the area, but he's not daylight. So if you get a buck that is hitting a scrape, in daylight, what are you thinking? Like, what's the first thing you're thinking? Like, shit, I got to pounce now? Or is it like one of those, because even if it's in like leading up to the rut where they're starting to get a little frisky and you're like, well, maybe he's just doing his due diligence and checking all of his scrapes. Or are you thinking like, man, he's bedding close right now. I need to pounce right now.
Yeah. To me, if I get a daylight picture of a deer that I'm after, man, I'm going after him. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not going to horse around and wait and see if he does it a second time. If I get a daylight picture of a deer, say he came in the evening on a scrape, and typically the one problem with scrapes, a lot of times they won't hit them a second day.
Right.
A lot of times I see them where they work them in almost like a 3-day cycle, and then, or, right after a rainstorm. So say maybe I seen a deer, he came in and he worked that scrape in broad daylight. Well, I guess I will wait a day, because then I might go and formulate a game plan to go back in and do a hanging hunt on the second and third day, expecting for him to come back to rework that again, unless it rains. If it rains or something in between there, and he hasn't been back in there, I'm definitely going to try to beat him to that. And that's where looking, and seeing where that deer is coming and going will play into that, and where I set up. And a lot of times I won't set directly over them, but if there's a situation that forces that, then I will.
For sure. So when you're talking about the rain, you're saying you're going to get in there because those bucks have to come back and freshen those scrapes up, right? And they're going to check them to see if anybody else did that, because that's kind of like a deer's, like when a deer knows, like even does, like they hit scrapes. So like he's going to come in and, even a doe is going to come around and be like, okay, I got to go. They just know that they have to go do that. Is that right? Is that correct? Like go in and work that scrape up again?
Yep. I feel like they have to go back in there. So say he's been working a scrape, and say during that day, say that morning or whatever, say 9, 10, 11 o'clock that day, and you got rain that comes through, and then the rain blows out of there or whatever. I would be chomping at the bit to be over there and set up somewhere expecting for him to come back through that evening to freshen that scrape.
Yep, I got you. That makes a lot of sense too, because we have a scrape on our family farm. I mean, it's there every year. It's the community scrape. It's the hub. But all the bucks hit it after dark. You know, you'll never get a buck that's hitting that usually in daylight, no matter what. I don't know why, but I think it's just the hub. And so then that always made me think, like, okay, he's here, but it's not daylight. You know, where's he coming from? How do you, I think it's me personally, and it could be me in my own way, but it's hard to hunt that deer. You know, it's hard to figure out what the hell he's doing.
Is that scrape on a field edge?
It's on a food plot edge, not a big food plot, like quarter acre at the most.
So the most effective scrapes that I've ever been at, I've had very little luck on field edge scrapes. Now, if you watch that video from that buck that I shot last year, that deer hit 2 scrapes before he came into that little food plot. Now, that little food plot is like a little tiny micro plot that I created inside of the woods. So he's basically just stepping out of the cover for just a little bit,
right?
And working that little edge over there and then walking in. So he kind of stays in the cover the whole time. And that's why those scrapes and that plot work. So, and even some of the best scrapes I've ever found on field edges, I just never seem to have any good luck over those. But when I find those interior scrapes that are like a hub scrape leading out to a food source, those are the scrapes that I'm looking for and that I want to hunt. And sometimes I'll create those scrapes.
Does it I'm sorry, go ahead.
And sometimes I'll go in and create that scrape. And a friend of mine turned me on to this, my buddy Heath Cisco, and take a white pine branch and we'll zip tie it to a spot where we can make a mock scrape. And I got scrapes now. I've been doing this for about 5 years, where now those have become hub scrapes inside of the woods. And I will purposely manipulate that spot, put that mock scrape in there with a tree and a wind in mind, and where the deer or where the bucks tend to like to bed on that property, to where they can come around, kind of J hook into that scrape, and I'm off to the one edge, but then they're kind of leading them out to wherever, whatever destination food that they're going to. Those scrapes work the best. And if you can find one that they've naturally done on their own, that's even better.
Okay, so are you finding these scrapes or making them close to any security cover, or is it, do you find them to be more successful, ones that are closer to security cover?
For sure. Yeah, that's a huge key to that. Like, you want it to where it is close enough that they're going to move through there because they feel secure with the cover, but you got to also be able to make it to where you can actually get to the tree that you want to too, and not blow up your spot trying to get into that location.
So do you have like a buffer that, like, so I mean, is it 80 yards from security cover? Is it 20 yards? Like, have you seen differences in like distance work better than not?
Yeah, probably around I'd say 50 yards.
Okay.
From that food.
That's kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah, it seems like that kind of somewhere right in there seems to be really good. And then they can kind of, hold up in there and mill around and kind of wait for, to get dark before they move out to those spots.
Yep.
Sometimes it's like, very last light in the woods, because, it's always getting darker inside of the woods than it is out there. And they just feel comfortable in those spots. And I've just had a lot of good luck, like using those white pine branches. And I'll take vines too, because they love to chew on those vines, and put their saliva all over those things.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's like something Jeff Sturgis, he loves to do, is the vines. And I got a couple of buddies that do the vines as well.
They work.
Yeah, they really do, and they just love playing with the damn thing. So
yeah, no, Jeff knows what he's talking about with that. I've watched a couple things, and I definitely agree with him on that.
Yeah, I do as well. So to kind of go back to the mobile hunt, so from October 23rd-ish to December 1st, you're going mobile. So first of all, let's kick it off. Like, what is your mobile setup, and how do you approach that?
So, my mobile setup now, and what I'm using the Lone Wolf Custom Gear 1.0 is one of my setups, and then I also have the new 0.5, which is the 0.5 weighs just a little over 5 pounds, and I'm using 2 mini sticks with 8ers, and then what I've done is I put a bag at the bottom, zip tied a little fanny pack bag basically at the bottom of my seat. Then I can throw all my straps and everything in there. I think my whole setup is around 12 pounds.
Wow. With the 1.0 or the 0.5?
With the 1.0, I believe it's around.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe it's around 12 pounds. I have to weigh it again. Everybody gets all crazy about that weight thing.
Yeah.
I got to watch what I say with that, because they're like, "Well, I weighed this," and like they'll be posting stuff online and everything else of stands hanging off. I'm like, okay, whatever. But
now, with only 2 mini sticks, how big are the mini sticks? And you did say that you're running 8ers, so that helps as well. But how big are the mini sticks?
Yeah, well, I'm running 4. I run 4 mini sticks.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I might try something a little differently too. I might try something in regards to like, a lot of times I'll have a couple screw-in steps in my pocket. So sometimes my first couple steps are just I'll just run a couple. Like Cranford seems to make like the best screw-ins ever. I don't know what they do with that screw, but those things, I mean, you can take those things in a honey locust and they slide
you
through.
You can do them
butter.
one-handed.
Yeah, like I don't know what it is about their screw, but I'll run a couple screw-in steps. And then, and Andre kind of turned me onto this, was like over the fact that he's had bucks, and I've had this happen too, not realizing it until conversations with him, where bucks have come in and seen that stick or seen that strap on that bottom of that tree or does and just not like it, where they don't seem to do that with the screw in. It's almost like they don't see it.
Yep.
So sometimes I'll run a couple screw-ins and then I'll start going up. And what I might end up doing is just doing the 3 screw-ins, 2 mini sticks with the 8ers, and then the top stick being our new double stick. So
for a transition stick.
Yes, yep. Exactly.
That's a good idea. That if you're able to screw in steps, that's a good point there. Just to kind of keep that sight line of the deer out of there too, so they're not freaking out about it, like you said. Yeah, so there's no disturbance. Actually, on one of our addictions episodes, Andre's in the stand. He kills a buck, and the deer comes in. You can see it plain as day in the video. The deer comes in, sees his stick, and bugs out like about. Runs out to like 20, 25 yards and just standing, looking back at his stick. Well, then he shoots the buck. Mm-hmm. But you can totally tell that deer saw that stick and did not like that situation. Yep.
And that was on a private farm in Iowa. So, what what's gonna happen if you're on public ground in Michigan or Ohio?
Yeah, right. Well, and Dan Infall even talked about that too. I don't know, last year before, when he came out with his sticks and how he, ties his ropes up a different way, or just ties them up so they're not dangling, because he said he's had bucks come in or does and blow just from that strap hanging, and that makes total sense. That's just the little things I think that a lot of people might forget, that it's like, that could be a game changer for you.
Oh, for sure. Like, I see guys and they'll hang a stand and they'll have their sticks and stand out there, and like they just let their straps just blow in the wind. I mean, I'm super, like, I'm wrapping those things up tight. There's not going to be any, movement coming from anywhere. I think, that's crazy to leave those things out there and catch something's attention. I mean, that's what a deer goes off of a lot of times is if they're not using their nose, and they're going to go off of movement.
Yeah, definitely. So, I agree.
Why draw attention, to your location? That's why I think too that sometimes it's really, I see guys blind rattle, and I'm like, did you think about that before you just cracked those horns?
Right. Yep.
Think about your positioning.
Yep.
What did you do to put yourself into where, a big deer is not going to circle in, and around, downwind side of you? Did you use any kind of structure or something to block them off from doing that? I think that's just suicide. I think you're just giving up your location as soon as you do that.
For sure. I actually did it. I don't rattle basically at all in Michigan. I will use a grunter. Basically, if I see a buck that I need to work, that's when I'll grunt. I don't do a lot of blind calling, but when I was in Iowa last year, that was the thought process I had. I blind rattled a few times, but it was to where I could see what a deer is doing downwind, or I had structure there knowing that deer wasn't going to get downwind and screw me up. That's the first thing that I thought of. And but I have had blind rattles work. I killed a buck in Missouri 2015 in the morning, got in, crisp morning, had some structure downwind that I knew that the deer were not going to bust me. It was actually a hill that the hill was huge. There was no way that the deer was going to get around me, behind me, and I cracked them together 52 seconds after I started my rattle sequence. He ran right underneath me, and I shot him at 32 yards. So it works when, like you said, if you have the perfect scenario, but it's a death sentence though too.
Yeah, because so for example, that morning, that deer was just in that state of mind.
100%. 100%.
And you caught him at the perfect time. And if you get them like that, and I've had them where they're out in the field and, working away from me, and I've had them where I've rattled before, and then they just turn around and look at me and throw up the middle finger and keep on walking.
For sure.
And then I've had times too where I've done that, and they didn't even turn around and look at me. They just turned their whole body and just started galloping towards me,
Yep.
on a dead run, because it was just the mindset, I think, and what he was feeling at that given moment.
Yeah. Well, and after I shot him too, we went back and looked at all the trail cam pictures and everything, and found him in every picture he was in. He was a bully. He was just like a deer that was just an asshole. He was always bullying deer. We had trail cams on video mode. He'd always be trying to fight them or trying to run them off of food sources and everything. And like you said, he was just in that mood that morning. I mean, Casey's rattled that deer different days and had different reactions. Mm-hmm. One day he runs in, the next day he's like, well, no, like you said, I'm not going over there, And I also think there's, to me, turkey hunting, I feel like there's a bubble. If you're reaping a turkey or you're trying to get in close to a turkey, I feel like there's a barrier. Usually it's 60 yards or 70 yards. If you can get in there and you have a decoy and you're trying to force yourself on him, more than likely that bird's going to come and visit you. But if you do it at 150 yards, he's probably going to be like, well, fuck you. You're not a threat to me right now. And I kind of feel like that's the same way with deer in some aspects.
Going back to your point on that deer that you rattled in too, and then observing those trail cam pictures later, right there is like, that's some information too. If you notice that about a deer, like, man, this deer here, he thinks he's a badass. Yep. Or this deer here is like, what, you can tell, like, he just he shies away from, that kind of stuff or whatever. That's where, if you're sitting in the stand, and you see, that deer that maybe he's kind of got that, kind of shy attitude and stuff like that, you're like, man, I can't call to him because he's just not that type of deer. Or if you get that bully, you're like, I can call that deer in. I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah, and he came in. I was in a creek bottom. In the fields, the ag fields were higher than me. I was down the bottom of it on both sides, and he come from the south, and it was a hayfield, and I couldn't see him out there. Like I said, I was just blind rattling. I think he was cruising that edge of that hayfield that morning and heard me, but couldn't see me. So that was key. Like, he could hear a fight, but he couldn't see me, and he couldn't see anything down in that creek. And he was probably like, well, shit, I need to go over and investigate. And whatever buck comes out, I'm going to beat his ass. That's, the buck that comes out hurt, So it's crazy when you get out west, and I've seen some fights where 2 bucks will be going at it, and you'll have 10 bucks from every direction running into the fight, basically as bystanders. Like, okay, who's going to come out limping? Who's going to come out where I can get a piece of them too? Yeah. It's crazy to watch.
Well, and I was in Kansas. Actually, it's a hunt that's on whitetail addictions, and I was out there, and me and a buddy went out there, and there's a property we'd never even seen before. All we had was like basically just an aerial of the place, and we went out there and just tried to figure it out in 7 to 10 days that we had, that we had to hunt that farm, and I had my horns with me early in the hunt, and it was in November, and I cracked them together on a couple different days, with some thought in mind, where I was set up and them not being able to get around me or whatever, but nothing. And then on it was on the very last day that I could be there, and then I was going to have to go home and go back to work. Jared Ordati.
Yep.
He was out there, and with another friend, and they were hunting another farm, and it said, we got a text. My buddy was in the tree with me because he was tagged out, and he said we rattled this morning and rattled a buck in. And I was like, and I had just brought my horns that morning again in case one was, out there going to get away from me or whatever. And I turned around, I told my buddy Mike, I said, you know what? I said, what do we have to lose? I said, it's my last day here. I'm like, I got to try something. I rattled 5 bucks in at once.
Holy crap.
and I killed one of them.
It's just crazy though. Like you said, the mindset, like the first 4 days of November, they could be just not wanting it. And the 5th day, I mean, every buck comes out of the woodwork. It's just, It's crazy how that turns on and off like that.
Yeah, it was nuts. Like, it went from like 0 to, I just said, hey, well, let's give it a try. And I mean, that buck came right in on a string and came to the base of the tree, actually caught me drawing and went out a little ways and then gave me a shot, and I shot him. And then right after that, I had another like big 10 with a split G2 come in. He was right in behind us at like 5 yards. And then he bugged out. And then we had this big old, I got it all on video too. And I had this big old bruiser just, come in there. Ready to kill something.
I love that.
He was so worked up. Mike and I were in a cedar tree about 8 or 10 foot high. Or no, it was a cottonwood because we were out in the open, but we had a cedar tree in behind us. And we were only like 8 or 10 foot high in this, and in this because that's where the cover was. If we went above it, we were going to be exposed. And he walked right by us at like literally 5 yards, and him and I were in that tree and talking to each other. And he's like staring at us, looking at us. Not just. I think if we got down, I think we would have gotten a fight with him. He was angry.
Get tangled up with a buck in Kansas. I don't know if I'd want to do that.
Oh, yeah. He had a big tine broke off and big scars on his back and everything else.
That's cool.
He was a cool deer.
Well, good deal. I've got one more question for you before we do wrap this up, and I want to kind of go back to the moon phase. So this year in 2000, which will be the 2020 season, the full moon is going to happen on October 31st. So what does that mean to you? Like, how are you going to approach that?
So I'm kind of looking at like this. So the 29th, or hold on, the 30th, the 31st, and the 1st, I think will be a little bit slow. I mean, this is just my 2 cents, and it's all weather dependent too. So the 29th, the 28th, the 27th, and 26th, I think are going to be killer. If you're on to a particular buck, I think those evenings are going to be phenomenal to get on that deer. And then you're going to come in like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Those mornings should be really, really good sets in November, depending on weather. But historically, and I don't know why this is, the first 5 days of November, a lot of times it always warms up.
Yep. Yeah.
I was actually going to say why.
That. I agree. I don't remember the last time where we had where I was, whether I was in Kansas or Iowa or whatever, but like last year in Iowa, I was there from the 2nd to the 7th or 8th, and those 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th were warm days, like warmer. You know, not like hot, but warmer. Like I want those low 30 days. You know?
Yeah.
So I agree.
That's been and I don't know why that is. And it's like, it always seems to happen. And then it always seems to like, all of a sudden, right around the 6th or so, it seems to start to cool back down a little bit. Now it'll snow like crazy and be 25 degrees this year because I said that, but
perfect.
But I don't, and it's funny, like, man, if I had to pick one day in November, God, November 9th has just been like the day for me in November. I tend to always go out. I tend to always be out of state too at that time. So then that's all I'm doing is hunting the whole time. But I think I've killed 5 bucks on the 9th.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Like, I've got a couple days like that. And obviously last year when I killed my biggest deer on the 7th of November, that is now my new favorite day. But the 2nd and the 4th have always been really good days for me in November for whatever reason. And then the 7th is now my favorite day, but for good reason. Hopefully it keeps that way, though.
I've always, the 7th is always election day, so I've always wanted to, like, in the 7th, there's so many guys out there, like, man, the 7th is my favorite day. And I'm always fired up for the 7th to come around. And the 7th has never been good to me. I'm like, what the hell? Like I'll like have days where I'm like, I haven't seen one deer today. Like, and now the sun's going down. This is, like, yep. I don't know. I'm snake bit on that day for some reason.
Well, good. I'll keep that day then. You can have the 9th. You keep
that day. I'll keep the 9th.
Perfect, man. Well, good deal. I know you're at work right now and taking your break, so I appreciate you coming on and doing this. And I pulled a lot of information out of this, and I know a lot of people have been writing in and wanting to know more about the moon phase. So I think a lot of people are going to take this out of there too. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm glad to be on, and I want to plug Whitetail Addictions
for
and
sure.
Custom Gear here for a second, but yeah, like I get onto our Lone Wolf Custom Gear YouTube page. You can see all of our Whitetail Addictions shows. We just did our final episode with Andre just last night, and then our Lone Wolf Custom Gear, where I think we have the best mobile hunting product on the market. I would love to do some comparisons to any other stuff that's out there for sure, because I think you take two guys like Andre and Cody, and they've really perfected what they started, what Andre had started back in 1984.
Yeah, they've got a good thing going, man, and it's been long lasting. And Andre, I mean, his track record is. I watched that episode last night, and I'm like, man, this guy's an animal. Like, he's just a different breed of hunter. You know, he is an animal. He just thinks differently.
He is. He's just got that knack, you know, like somebody had said, like, you know, some people just, you know, they're just naturally gifted in athletics or whatever it might be, or book smarts or whatever. He's just got a way to read sign and fully understand it and make a move on a deer before the deer makes the move.
Yep. And get in there undetected, you know, and do that and get he's killed some giants. I mean, giants.
We were talking last time I was out there. He's got 18 gross boons with a bow.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. He's supposed to be coming on the podcast sometime soon. I talked to him 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and I got to re-up with him, but I can't wait to have him on and do that, because I just want to pick his brain.
Oh yeah, it won't take very much. He'll get wound up and into some good stories. He loves to get into some, and he's got some great stories. I mean, stuff that, you know, just some giants that he's hunted over the years that he never got even. You know, he's hunted a couple bucks that would have flirted with that world record. Typical.
And just to have that in an area where you can hunt that's the first hurdle, you know, like even just finding a deer like that. They're not like that every day, you know.
Like it's seriously lightning in a bottle.
It is. Yeah. So, well, cool, man. I like Justin said, go and check out Whitetail Addictions on YouTube. I love watching your guys' content. It's just cool to see all those guys, all you guys, you know, doing your thing and killing giants in different states and getting on different deer, and it's so cool. Go check that out. And again, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. And we still have a date to do another podcast in the fall sometime. You just gotta let me know when we're gonna do it. So I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that podcast.
Me too. Sounds good, man. Well, thank you very much.